So here we have Mr. Warren, who did this interview on IFL TV a couple of days ago, in which he quoted chapter and verse from the British Boxing Border Control Rulebook and demonstrated that they were well within their rights to withdraw their sanctioning of the Conor Benn Chris Eubank Jr. fight, despite Eddie Hearn's previous claims to the contrary. And indeed, I looked up the rules that Frank Warren referenced, and any of you can do the same. They're right here on the British Boxing Border Control website, the rules and regulations for 2022. The first rule he cited was 9.8, which says, the board or an area council shall have power to prohibit any contest which, in their opinion, is not in the interests of boxing. Now, obviously, this rule can be applied very broadly because it's all based upon their opinion. And some people would argue that it's open to abuse. But in this particular instance, I think it was applied very appropriately. And I think most people would agree with that. The next rule that he referenced was 31.5, which says, all license holders agree to cooperate fully with any World Anti-Doping Code compliant anti-doping investigations or proceedings, whether conducted by UK Anti-Doping or any other competent body. And he referenced that in relation to VADA, because of course Eddie Hearn has been saying that the British board don't recognize VADA. They only recognize UKAD. Hearn has said that repeatedly. Well, they perhaps don't recognize VADA because VADA don't investigate. VADA don't sanction, as in punish fighters. So they may not recognize them in that context. But in terms of recognizing the results that they produce, that's unclear because their actions suggest that they do recognize the results that they produce. Because why would UKAD, who are obviously closely tied to the British board, be apparently conducting this investigation into Conor Benn right now? So again, need some clarity on that. Frank Warren didn't, however, mention the previous rule, which says, all such licensed persons as described above shall be deemed to have made him or herself familiar with and agreed to be bound to comply with and abide strictly by the anti-doping rules and all other anti-doping rules applicable to him or her and submit to the authority of the board any designees of the board, including UK anti-doping, in the application and enforcement of the anti-doping rules. So again, this just puts a bit more meat on the bones, and it's saying that the British board can designate other anti-doping agencies, not just UKAD, to investigate fighters and actually issue punishments. So again, VADA don't normally do that kind of thing as far as I'm aware. They just test and make everybody aware of the results. The issue that people are having, obviously, is the fact that Eddie Hearn, Kalle Sauerland, etc., decided that they could do the job of UKAD, that they didn't need some outside agency to actually investigate the situation and make a decision on whether it was appropriate or safe to go ahead with the bout. They took it upon themselves and said, oh no, we can do that job. We don't need UKAD to do it. And a lot of people have an issue with that because the promoters are not exactly in a neutral position, are they? The promoters have spent a lot of money promoting the fight, and they stand to gain a lot of money by putting the fight on. So there's a conflict of interest there. You want a body that isn't going to make millions and millions and millions from the fight going ahead to do that kind of investigation. So again, there are legitimate issues that people have with the way Eddie Hearn, Kalle Sauerland, etc. have conducted themselves in this situation. And finally, there was something that Gareth A. Davis mentioned in his most recent interview on IFL. He said that some people have taken issue with the term failed test being used in relation to Conor Benn, and they instead prefer the term adverse finding. And he pointed out that this is just semantics, people using legalese, presumably because they are Conor Benn fans or Eddie Hearn fans, both, whatever. At the end of the day, it's irrelevant what term you use in a non-legal setting. And we, as boxing fans, are in a non-legal setting in the sense that we don't have a contract with VADA. We don't have a contract with Conor Benn. We don't have a contract with Eddie Hearn or the British board or anybody else. So we don't have to use legalese in order to describe a failed test and adverse finding. It's not necessary. We know what we mean. We're describing exactly what we mean. The papers have all been using the term failed test. Again, because they don't have a contract with any of these people. So there's no problem with saying failed test outside of a legal context. The reason that even lawyers and people who are experts in the world of legal, there's a reason they don't use legalese in day-to-day conversations, normal conversations, casual conversations. You know why they don't use legalese? Because in common English, many words and terms have very different meanings in legalese. So if you start speaking to someone in a casual conversation in legalese, they're not going to understand what you're saying. They're going to get the wrong end of the stick and it's just going to be a mess. So again, unless you're dealing with the police, with contracts, with anything in the legal world, then there is no reason to insist that people use legal terms defined in some kind of contract with VADA or something. This is just silly. We know what we mean. But anyway, if people would prefer to use the term adverse finding rather than failed test because it helps them sleep better at night, go ahead and do that. It's all just silly anyway. We all are aware that Conor Benn is right now getting due process. He's under investigation. His first test was dirty. That's what it was. There's some, oh no, it wasn't a dirty test. No, it was a dirty test. A dirty test means that there was something that shouldn't have been in there in the sample. There was an illegal substance. He will now get the opportunity, as it describes in all the articles, to provide any evidence or evidence of mitigating circumstances, i.e. a contaminated test or contaminated sample. Perhaps he ingested this substance or it got into his body inadvertently. He'll get the opportunity to present all this to UKAD, the British board. And if they find that his explanation is reasonable, plausible, believable, then I'm sure that they will exonerate him. Okay? We all know that process is going on. We all know that process, or most of us know that process, goes on whenever somebody tests positive for anything. So again, whether you want to use adverse finding or failed test, it's just irrelevant. So yeah, Gareth A. Davis did a good job pointing out the unnecessary nature of people using all this semantics because they don't like the negative context, they don't like the negative connotations that come with the word failed. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about this whole situation, about the British Boxing Border Control rules, especially this rule where they have the power to prohibit any contest, which in their opinion is not in the interest of boxing. Because in this instance, they basically use this rule as a way to suspend Conor Benn without actually suspending him. They used it in that same, it's like if you can't legally suspend him because your rules don't allow for it, then let's pick out a different rule where we can at least stop the contest going ahead. So it's almost like a soft suspension or an indirect suspension, that kind of thing, which is contrary to what Eddie Hearn straight away started coming out and saying he's clear to fight. Okay, if he's clear to fight, Eddie, then why did the British board prohibit the contest? See, Eddie Hearn likes using all the word magic and everything. He's clear to fight. And the British board wouldn't sanction the bout. They prohibited it. And you're talking about he's clear to fight where? Under whose jurisdiction? Huh? I mean, Jarrell Miller was technically, I'm sure, clear to fight after he tested positive 1 billion times because he could have gone and fought in some other jurisdiction in some obscure country and got a license there, I'm sure. So you could say technically Jarrell Miller was clear to fight. It's just nonsense. Conor Benn wasn't allowed to go ahead with that Chris Eubank Jr. fight. And the British board prohibited the contest. What, did they do it for no reason, Eddie? It's unbelievable. Eddie Hearn, Callum Sauerland and co., as I mentioned previously, basically tried to do the job or thought that it was appropriate for them to do the job of a body like UKAD. I mean, it's not appropriate because there's a conflict of interest. It's unbelievable. So, as people have rightly pointed out, Hearn, if he's going to be consistent regarding his stance on PEDs, this is a man who once said that all people who are caught using PEDs should be banned for life. And since that time, I mean, what has he done? He's worked with Povetkin and Luis Ortiz, and obviously Dylan White failed a test. Loads and loads of other fighters who failed tests. Marius Wack has also fought on Eddie Hearn shows, right, against Dylan White. I mean, he's gone against what he previously said so many times. It's a farce. So this is not an isolated incident. This is just the latest in a long line of contradictory behavior by Eddie Hearn regarding PEDs. Whether Conor Benn is innocent or guilty, surely you'd want to clear this situation up with an organization that doesn't have a conflict of interest regarding this fight. Let's say UCAD or whoever else. Clear the situation up first, call the fight off. If Conor Benn is exonerated, then you can go ahead. But as I say, Eddie Hearn tried to circumvent that process and be his own arbiter. Right? Oh, no, I'll decide. We'll decide whether it's appropriate. Unbelievable. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below.